So I welcome here on stage a very interdisciplinary group of practitioners, all active in fields connected to design thinking and urban development. So I have joined Maarten, Desmet on this panel. Next to him, Liesbeth Huybrechts, I hope I say it correctly, who is an associate professor at the University of Hasselt's Faculty of Architecture and a postdoctoral researcher in the area of participatory design and spatial transformation processes. She is involved among many other projects in the Living Lab, the Other Market, a space for reflection and action on the future of work, and the research project Traders, dealing with participatory design and art in public space. Rozina Spinnoy is a design strategist and social entrepreneur, the founder and director of the Belgian Design Council and the BITS Belgium, which stands for Business Improvement District. She's also the creative director of interior design consulting agency. How I framed it, I hope that's correct. So design to style. Rosario Talevi is an architect and spatial practitioner, editor and curator. Among the projects she has curated and programmed is the Urban School Ruhr, a pedagogical experiment and fictional institution investigating participatory and artistic practices in urban spaces, and Make City, Berlin's first festival for architecture and urban alternatives. Fabian Seibert is a product designer, teacher and social and cultural engineer. He founded the design studio Zülz Koteletts and the networking initiatives Design Metropole Aachen and Hello Designer Tour. And myself, I am Alice Haddad. I'm moderating the discussion today. I have a background in architecture and I'm working on artistic, curatorial and editorial projects, among which perhaps it is high time for xeno architecture to match, which intersects contemporary architectural and philosophical discourses to examine and speculate about inclusive design processes. And this, I would say, is where we all meet. So I've prepared a short introduction that is a bit more formal, maybe for today, because I will read it. So I believe that what we all search is for a more inclusive, thus more sustainable society, a society that embraces its diversity and cares for the well-being of its communities. We have seen also maybe through Maarten's talk how tricky it is to acknowledge and claim a set of universal values. Every day when I read the local international news, I unfortunately realize the extent to which an inclusive politics is neither evident nor a fundamental principle that I can identify as common value. The environmental catastrophes, ideological conflicts and financial crises we are facing at global scale are leading to growing economic and social inequalities and massive migratory movements that result in local austerity measures and securitarian policies fueling the rise of xenophobic discourses. In this context, the subject of politics and social issues has gained a new urgency in urban planning and spatial practices. Particularly since 2008, in the aftermath of the economical crisis, we've witnessed the resurgence of grassroots initiatives as architectural strategies to instigate social change. Among the reasons of this development was, on the one hand, certainly the diversification of the profession and the lack of employment in the traditional sector, and on the other hand, the overall frustration phase of the political turmoil and lack of accountability by state-run agencies. When it comes to the translation of political engagement into spatial realm and spatial practice, resistance against authority has been directed towards local and direct actions and horizontal, transparent and participatory practices. These are inspired by radical experiments that started blooming in the 60s, 70s. Examples are countless and diverse, from communal living and squatting to do-it-yourself construction, urban farming initiatives, or the formation of citizens' committees. Building on the concept of self-governance and appropriation to claim for more democratic and better distributed rights, some of these tactics have proven to be effective to enhance the social cohesion of urban communities, influence policymakers, and thus positively impact their environmental habitat. However, we could observe, and this is obviously subject for discussion, that if too radical such initiatives are at risk of being silenced or pushed to the margin of society, and if too compliant, they risk of being co-opted by the forces they initially attempted to fight. If the subversive nature of these initiatives has decreased over time, they could also increasingly serve as urban development tools implemented or at least encouraged by local government. The somewhat contained experiments may generate impromptu interventions that can bypass conventional containment, that might bypass conventional planning systems, link marginalized groups to those in position of power, and steer the collaboration between private and public stakeholders that is, it seems, dearly needed. And our guest today, I hope, and I'm sure will certainly elaborate on these various aspects. So while bottom-up processes are working hand-in-hand with top-down infrastructure and policies, the practitioners involved in shaping our urban environment are diversifying, reformulating their own professional identity, whether designer, architect, educator, consulting strategist, activist, social entrepreneur, cultural facilitator, and the like. The aim for inter- and transdisciplinarity that values management and mediation skills as subjects for creativity and innovation within design thinking. The conception of spaces, physical places, and all its ingredients, as much as networks and media platforms, in this regard, ultimately seeks to enable the dialogue between stakeholders from different background and level of expertise, and thus demands the revision of our learning and teaching methods and of the places for knowledge exchange and dissemination. It is certainly relevant to constantly ask ourselves, especially within a context like in Hasselt and the cities that are close by, that promotes international and regional collaboration. How does the local meet the global and vice versa? Today, I would love to address this inquiry into designing a more inclusive city through three overlapping themes, which I am sure are fundamental to each of our guest practices. So first, I'd like to focus on the link between education and situated research and its permeability with urban matters. Second, I'd like you to further elaborate on designing networks for exchange and dissemination. And third, together maybe bring the debate towards the concrete tools and methodologies that may bridge the gap between discourse and practice, which also Maarten basically presented in his talk through his practice. So maybe to start, I would invite Rosario. You are interested in alternative pedagogies, pedagogical model, and this in regard to the urban school Ruhr as an institution within an institution that really works with the place where it is embedded, so the region, but as well with different European cities. So that this is on one hand, I think, interesting to this idea of education and the city, and at the same time, likely Liesbeth, maybe you will have the opportunity to also respond with your own background, and really embedded in academia, and how you work around research lab there.
Hi to all the familiar faces already, that's nice. So I was not sure what we would do today, how we would articulate the discussion, but we decided that I would talk about my latest project, which is the urban school Ruhr, and seeing this nice living room, I thought it would be nice if I read a text for you. It's an essay I write it together with Marcus Wader, who is the initiator of the urban school, and it's we're now finishing a book that it's entitled Explorations in Urban Practice, which reflects and builds I guess, on the idea of the urban school. And we're kind of printing right now, so it's very fresh, and maybe it's also nice to do this. I'm not going to read the whole introductory essay, but I will read some parts that explain a little bit what the urban school of Ruhr is. So it's entitled Explorations in Urban Practice, the Urban School Ruhr, by Marcos Vader and Rosario Talevi. Urban School Ruhr is both a learning platform and a pedagogical experiment that investigates participative and artistic practices in urban space. During 2016, USR developed its activities through assembly seminars, on-site workshops, discursive dinners, and ASIF installations that took place in the cities of Bitten and Hattingen in Germany, as well as field trips to other European cities, prior to the establishment of the School Open program. All of these endeavors consider the role of the citizens and of the civic in urban transformation. What can we do in this context, and how can we get involved? A self-proclaimed institution, the school has evolved through several different incarnations, from physical ephemera, a stamp, a poster, map, a postcard, to a digital presence, the website and then social media, from a nomadic entity, one-day meetups, 4-day-long field trips, to its finally becoming situated in a specific context, the Ruhr region. Cedric Price once asked, while smoking a cigar, I don't know if you're acquainted with this famous picture of Cedric Price, the British architect. He used to smoke a cigar and asked, technology is the answer, but what was the question? And rephrasing this in relation to the Ruhr region is an interesting exercise for us. The area is an ex-industrial utopia fueled by post-World War II Wirtschaftswunder, like the economic miracle, and then transformed into a modern cultural landscape, following Essen's naming as European Culture of 2010. With Urban School, we want to ask, culture is the answer, but what was the question? Built up upon a foundational belief that together experts and amateurs can initiate a space for conversation, the school prioritized exchange and dialogue that is not necessarily attached to a specific outcome, result, or intervention in the real reality. Instead, we understand conversation as the first step to co-producing cities. It therefore relied profoundly on immaterial production, by developing informal networks, nurturing friendships, investing in time-intensive encounters, and common-based peer-to-peer exchange. USR shaped an emotional landscape of value in itself. Maybe I finish here. It continues, but I think I leave it there too with the emotional landscape. Thank you.
Liesbeth, if you want to reply.
Yeah. Okay, I haven't prepared any text, so I just was here to debate. But very nice start, I think, of the debate, because I think in a way what with the Faculty of Architecture and Lucas School of Arts, where Pablo is part of, we try to think already for years to deal differently with the city in relation to education as well, and to research, and to be honest, we have been working much more with another city than Hasselt. In that sense, the school is for me a new opportunity to rediscover this city, which opportunities it brings, which questions it brings. So I hope together with the residents we can find the questions we should really ask here. But for Genk, because I worked there before already for 10 years, questions were more clear. And the question we dealt with there was the fact that there was because of the closure of a big factory, a car factory, and the mines, it was suddenly a place where there was a lot of unemployment and so on. And we saw that what is the question indeed? We saw that the model of the creative industry was projected to solve this problem of unemployment in the city. So we wanted to create a different type of space, which was actually the living lab, the andere Markt. It's like something is flying over. And in this living lab, we wanted together with the neighborhood, start to discover, maybe it's creative industry that is the answer, but maybe it's not. So we started to map, actually together with Pablo, the different skills and capabilities of citizens of Genk, both citizen organizations, small collectives, but also policymakers and so on, what their core skills were in making the city in a different type of city. And based on that, we started developing projects there. So the intention was to have a lab that was there for years, and then we have projects, and then based on the different challenges in the project, bring people together from this big database of people we gathered. So one project was on an old coal track. We're still working on it already for 3 years. That was abandoned and was searching for a new destination. So we started talking to all the people living alongside the coal track to see, what did they do there, develop there, and so on, and starting making new links, new collectives, and then based on these new collectives, make the future of the coal track together. And actually, after 3 years, we have a proposal for a project for this big park, coal track park, that is based on a lot of these coalitions between very small citizen collectives that maybe are in itself not powerful enough to create a project or sustain a project like that, but together they can actually do it. And together with the park, which is an urban project, it's an architectural project, we propose to start up a project bureau, like an office that can trigger new coalitions, because of course these coalitions are never fixed. So it's so we just submitted a proposal. It's not approved yet, but we hope, of course, because it's an experiment in a sense that it's not just the design we submitted as being approved, but also this social practice of making of coalitions as being an integral part of the project. Now to link it to education, together with, for instance, Peter Prinsen here in the room, we try to link our educational projects very closely to the work of the Living Lab. So every year we detect, this is a particular challenge and that maybe we have to develop a bit further in real life with the community. So every September we have 2 weeks, and together with the students, master students, architecture, we start to build together some of the dreams we have. For instance, on the coal track, there was a clear dream of having like a stop place where bicycles could stop and just enjoy locally produced food from the local community gardens and so on. But also a place that could disclose quite close down neighborhoods and have a more clear link to the city. And instead of only drawing it in plans, we started building it and experiencing, what this link actually could mean. And it brought an enormous dynamic of people from this social housing community being part of the project, celebrating the project, and also for them it became more clear what the potential of the project could be. So we try to tap into education also as a way for our students to learn to work with communities, not to be architects only working from a distance. And at the same time, community learning to know architects. Our group is also called spatial capacity building, and so we really focus a lot on how capacities can be built among citizens, policymakers, but also architects in working in this type of complex spatial projects. And so I think the challenges here in Hasselt will be very different. I live here, but I'm not from a professional point of view, I'm less of an expert, so I'm very curious to see what will happen.
And on the question of the time frame, the master's program lasts 1 year, and then maybe they changed studio or the last 3 years. So I was wondering of how that type of short-term development falls into the long-term development of a city and of a community, the creation of a community.
Yeah, that's a very particular challenge we try to deal with now also, because one link is the living because we stay there as researchers, so we bridge the periods between the student work. At the same time, we try also to bridge between studios. So now, for instance, this project I mentioned with the Texasweg, where they built this station. So it's one group that has been building it, but now a next group will continue from a perspective of construction and sustainable materials. So they will study it further and take it to a next level. So we try to bridge beyond, for instance, also a thesis project is maybe linked to it, and that will study more the dynamics of the neighborhood in relation to the artifact and so on. So in that sense, we try to bring it together, and in that sense, for the community, it becomes one elongated project, while maybe for the students, it's a more short-term project. For some it's short-term, for others it's more long-term.
And maybe to come back to Rosario, you also plan to do a lot of, I hope it's enough to, you also plan to bring your students to different European cities. It's a different type of learning, of course. It's you, correct me of course if I'm wrong, but you come into a context you don't know and you learn from it and you bring it back to the local community.
Yes. First, we didn't call the students. We call them participants because our school, although it's a school, it's we try to question this idea of who teaches, who's these binaries of teacher, student, and we try to at least question them. So we used different words. Participants, we thought it was more was relating better to the idea of a school, someone that wants to participate. And the idea of, we started with the trips, so the school, maybe it's interesting to know, it's funded by a cultural institution from the Ruhrgebiet, which is called Urbane Kunst der Ruhr, and it's a big institution that was developed after Essen being named capital of culture, and it's the institution that has worked a lot with the community and a lot with public art. So basically our school, it's disguised as a cultural project that is disguised as a school, if it makes sense. And the idea was to invite people from the Ruhrgebiet to go abroad and to visit 4 different cities. It was, we started going to Marseille, then we went to Paris, then we went to Athens, and we finished in Liverpool, where there were some kind of similar situations to the Ruhrgebiet. And we invited always 5 people from the Ruhrgebiet and 5 others from different contexts, so that there was a mixed group. And then we would curate a program, we would meet different stakeholders in city making. Not always people will like what we do. We always, for example, in Marseille, we went to visit the big development corporation that is now doing this Euro-Mediterranean port. So this big port model to export from Marseille to all the Mediterranean, specifically in North Africa. And then in Liverpool we went to Huybrechts from Jan van Heeswijk. No? So we were visiting very different scale of projects and to meet and come into contact with different people. That was very important, not to always meet the people you like or the projects that feel good. So the idea behind the trips was to bring people from the Ruhrgebiet outside the Ruhr, get inspired, and maybe then bring them back. And also to understand that these could be the ambassadors of the open program when we situated the school in Witten. So it had like a manifold strategy.
So this idea of ambassadors, I can maybe make a link because it will, with this idea of dissemination of like a framework of values that come from different parts of the world that, or at least here, it's not that much far, it's European and very regional actually, knowledge that is built and it's being disseminated through ambassadors. Maybe to make a bridge to you, Rozina, the idea of building up this council in Belgium, really, and also the BITS, so working with a framework that already exists in different European, maybe even global network of connecting design thinkers together or practices. I would like maybe if you reflect, because of course the educational programs will somehow also bring the new people who might connect to this type of networks.
Hi, well, maybe I just start with explaining a little bit about why I started the Belgium Design Council, because obviously with Belgium being in regions, there's been great contact with Flanders, DC, and before Design Flandern, and of course Creative Bologna, etc. But it was dealing with design in a very aesthetic way, and not design strategy and design thinking to solve societal challenges, and that's why I started Belgium Design Council as a bottom-up, which government in Brussels had said, don't do, just help us. But I went ahead and did it, of course. And the idea of Belgium Design Council was really about having multi-sector, multi-level collaborations to solve these societal challenges. So for example, one project we are working on at the moment is about inclusivity and mental health. Mental health is an epidemic. It's not sexy to design for mental health, but we decided to really tap into the ecosystem in Brussels, and there's a very, very healthy sort of ecosystem from the tech startup side to this startup side itself, social entrepreneurs, designers, neuroscientists, complete mix of people, complete mix of ages, private and public sector, also approaching some of the private sector companies that already understand what design thinking and design strategy is, and decided to reach out to the community and say, okay, this is a problem we want to tackle. How can we co-design it? How can we co-design solutions and be inclusive, be participatory, and have private public sector involved? Of course, it's always difficult to get that buy-in initially from public sector, but we found that just by collaborating with certain key stakeholders, bottom up and top down, that eventually government wanted to be part of it. And so the idea was really to tackle many of the issues, and also through the ecosystem. We're part of another sort of organisation of the Civic Innovation Network, which also are trying to do systemic design thinking, but with a bottom-up approach, which again eventually gets some awareness through public sector and gets the funding. But in terms of the context of the city, and how do we design our communities, it has to be very, very local. So there again, we thought, let's do a pilot, and we contacted our local mayor in one of the smallest communes and explained to him, you know, we want to help with some of the challenges within the commune, but we changed the narrative. We never talk about design thinking. We always talk about socio-economic regeneration, which also brought us to looking at what frameworks exist around the world. Rather than reinventing the wheel, what is out there that has already established private, public, civic and educational, the quadruple helix if we want to call it in the smart city context. What exists out there? And that brought me to this concept of these business improvement districts. But of course we have to be inclusive of citizens, but it's still interesting to look at the concept of business improvement districts in these bids. And we've seen they've existed since the 60s and 70s and started in Northern America from areas which needed regeneration, and citizens got together and decided to solve those challenges themselves, but of course also reached out to public sector and private sector. And so there's bids all over the world actually, and so we decided to sort of go along to one of the global summits where it was from the Cape Town Association to Times Square Alliance to many other bids. And we started that as a non-profit organisation itself, so Bids Belgium, where it's using also the sort of design and creative thinking and seeing how can we really foster these collaborations from the ecosystem. So one example would be Ghent. Ghent has been influenced by the bids. We didn't start it, it was already existing. So we've seen them 2 years ago, where the city decided to invest 200,000. Now they invest 1.4 million, and they will have private sector also contribute financially because they've seen the rewards of this horizontal participatory approach. Also, a lot is about transparency. It's about being transparent, and it's about creating the trust, it's about creating the identity, and it's about working together. And this is a change, and this is where education comes in, because it's really about educating the public sector and the private sector and what this means and what the benefits are. And so with me it helped to see what other bids were doing and use that as a selling point to local government when it came to doing some pilot cases in Brussels of the bids. And now we see that actually some of the communes are experimenting with participatory budgeting and wanting to create a culture of transparency, and that's what we hear a lot. Obviously at the European level it's always the examples of Scandinavia and Helsinki, Finland and Barcelona of this really kind of having the bottom up eventually becomes in charge and works transversely.
And do these bids, would you say, work as ambassador for a common value? Do they, as we could see, as something that can be shared and then all over globally, basically?
Yeah. The whole purpose is to create, as I said, the private, public, civic partnerships. And so for any zone that would become a BIDS, it's about hearing what the people want. It's about really being participating, listening to what the priorities are for that area and people deciding where the money will go. So I think it would be, in a way, a kind of, whether it's even an association or a civic organisation, but you have to have this private, public, civic, educational institution working together. So, yeah.
Maybe coming to a smaller region, back to a smaller regional type of network. You, Florian, have been involved with this Hello Design Tour as well, the network of maybe more peers. How do you feel, how do you contribute to the regional development of the city? Or maybe you can combat this idea.
Yeah, that's a tough question. my approach, or the approach of me and my friends basically, has been totally different. Most of us are creatives or artists, and we're from Aachen, which is like a border city, 2 miles from Belgium, 1 mile from the Netherlands. And in Aachen, it's a city with 80,000 students, which is quite a lot, almost a third of the population, and most of them are boys. So the city is a bit strange in some aspects. A lot of beer, and people who come to study in Aachen, they see the city as a place where you get a very good education. The engineering university is top 10 in the world or something, I don't know, but a very good one. And then they go off to other places. People don't stay in Aachen. That's one part of the world in Aachen, and the other one is the world of the people who have nothing to do with the university, and they are basically locals, or what would you call it? I forgot. But it's a problem. You have these two worlds, and we have a problem of identity. People usually don't like Aachen. It's provincial. It's simple-minded. People always talk about the government up there, so there's hardly any connection. People don't feel integrated into processes, and our approach as a group of creatives has always been to create identity in different ways. One way would be to make things happen, not just plan events, things that people can talk about. Because from my personal perspective is when I usually identify myself with a place when I have a great time there, when I experience something special. And that's what we want to create for people. But we also want to give it a name, because a place also needs a simple, sexy name. So what we did is what we called it Design Metropole Aachen, which is a bit unrealistic but cool. We started marketing this idea all over the place through our very little bottom-up approaches. Like me as a product designer, I go to trade fairs all over the world to sell my ideas, my products, and I usually stamp proud member of Design Metropole Aachen on my booth. So it's quite well known in the world already. In Tokyo a few years ago, I was approached by a journalist who said, "Oh, Aachen, that's a design city, isn't it?" I was like, yeah. So that's how we work. To be a little bit. It's all bottom up. It's easy to understand what we do. It's easy to swallow. We don't build a big theory around it like artists do, but we approach it like product designers, where the product has to taste good and be sexy.
So you would say it's somehow a guerrilla tactics hand in hand with really more branding strategies that can be used, incorporated in city branding even?
Yeah. The thing is that we experienced that you shouldn't, we always waited for, or in the beginning we waited for the city or the government to support us with what we did, and it never worked. Because Germans, we're also typical Germans, we are fear-driven people, so we're always afraid to make a mistake. which maybe makes us great engineers, but it doesn't make the things we do sexy. So, so you can't really be, you can't really work with the government or politicians and expect from them to be a first, but they only like to be a second first when they think, hey, things are in safe haven, then we can say it's a good project. And it's also a good deal between us and the politicians and administration, because when things go wrong, we fucked up. When things are great, they can say, yeah, we knew it. and when you do things that have sort of a fun factor or something where people talk about, then in a second step you get support from the city and the politicians. It's really interesting, that you have to be a first. You have to be courageous, you have to work low budget, you have to be very effective. And this way is for us the only way to create identity for our city. But the second step is then to approach politicians for support.
And maybe as you've also worked on artistic design interventions that were put into a city within cultural institutions or cultural festivals, which indeed has more this character of being an element, an object, or even if it's possession, it implicates the participants maybe for a very short amount of time. And how do you feel that that's enough to have an impact? Well, of course, on the other side of the spectrum, I also see other types of processes that are sensitive, bits by bits, integrating into a community, which is a very in contrast, I would say, towards that approach.
Yes. It's a bit tricky.
It's an
question.
Emotional, maybe,
yeah.
to come back to
what we create is something easily consumable and that people can talk about, but it's over when it's over. It's like music, performing arts. You have to be there, but you also have the word of mouth factor, which is very strong. People see what we do. 2 years ago, we had the year of Charlemagne, Charles the Great, where the people in Aachen claim that he's a German, and the people in France say no, he's French. So it's quite a nice battle. But in Aachen, they had this year of Charlemagne, and they celebrated it top down. So we did a little rally or demonstration. And maybe you know that Charlemagne, he's one of the first Europeans, that's how people in Aachen celebrate him, and he conquered and Christianized Europe with the sword. That's how he did it. Basically, people who didn't want to convert to Christianity basically got killed by him. He said, "You want to become Christians? No. So he went to, in one incident, he went to Saxony, the area behind Cologne, and tribes that the Saxons, they lived, used to live between the area behind Cologne till the eastern end of Germany, Leipzig, Dresden. And so we did a rally to donate blood, to donate blood and give it back to the Saxons, because he had killed, it's a legend that he supposedly killed 40,000 Saxons in one day. So that's what we did. We did an anti-celebration, and that's what people talk about. It's easy to consume. We went out there with a megaphone and yelled, "Donate blood, give it back to the Saxons." easy stuff, easy to consume, easy to talk about.
But it creates a big narrative. I mean, it's by creating stories that are fictional, absurd maybe, it integrates the public discourse,
of course.
and maybe falls back to
it creates identity. You can always relate to history. You can relate to current events, things happening, political discourses. It's quite easy, and for us the main goal is to create some identity. So people talk about it and feel, hey, it's basically event based. You only have a short chance to witness something, and then it's over. And so it's basically live as intense as you can, and yeah.
I was wondering if Maarten, you would want to react after actually discovering what everyone's practices.
Thank you. I think it's a very noble project in a way. I was thinking about the article about the hacking in the city, that they talk about smart city, and the guy saying that we're creating smart cities to create this kind of a perfect city, but perfect for whom? Actually, maybe it's more security and more, but for whom is the city smart then? And I think you can say the same about city marketing initiatives where you can brand the city, but for whom? Who benefits from it? Not everybody, I think. You can also state about ecological cities, for example. There's a whole fuss about building green and building more ecological, which it's more sustainable. But sometimes we forget for whom is it, and maybe these kind of value frameworks can help us look at not only the marketing identity, financial side, but also the social benefits from it. But I think this kind of initiatives to make people belong to this region, or give them the feeling that they belong, are of course very nice in a way. But the question is always, why? Is it to create identity? But why do you want to create identity? It's probably a very noble motive, but yeah.
Identities are very emotional, I think. For Germans, if you say the word Berlin, everybody's like, and when you say Aachen, nothing happens. The difference is probably that I'm not an architect. I don't think in physical structures that much. But that's maybe the negative point, that it's event-based thinking, and yeah.
Can I say something on that point? Sure.
I actually think identity is incredibly important. In our little commune, when we did the sort of pilot, we gave the project to the citizens to decide what the DNA and identity was of the commune. And it's in the north side where there's like the big basilica of Brussels. And so they use that as a form of identity. But I also use identity, I think, as a part of inclusivity. Because if I look at the next commune of Molenbeek, and I look at how people don't have an identity and a relation to the area, I think it's incredibly important. So I think there's two sides to this. There's the sort of marketing side of an area, but also a sense of belonging, that people feel they're part of the community. I may not have been born here in Belgium. I'm obviously born in Scotland, but it's not even obvious, I guess, because people still ask, where are you really from? With being in Brussels for 15 years, I feel very much the identity and a sense of belonging. And I think there's many, I can still, speak to second, third generation Moroccans who are born in Belgium, but they don't feel that they're Belgian, and there's not a sense of belonging because they've not been part of any commune or city process that involved them, that then resulted in them in some way having this identity and feeling a sense of trust with government and local government. There's not been any participation, so I think so much is also connected to designing our democracies, actually, and designing our local governments when it comes to designing areas. And also what you say about, I think, innovation and ideas, so much is bottom up. And you're so right in saying that actually then government will follow once they see it's a success. But I think a lot of ideas and innovation and amazing ideas, they come out of the sector. You're not going to have it from within the sector of government, or government saying, great, let's be part of, come, we want to innovate, be part of the process. So I think it's incredibly important, the sense of identity and sense of belonging.
One thing, I totally agree. So, and I think the process of thinking about what DNA is it and what is our identity, is the goal in itself, I think. But just to give you an example of how it can be done in a very bad way, I live in Antwerp, as you might have noticed, and we have a very big part of our economy is diamond trading. For centuries now, cutting of diamonds and trading. And now there is a campaign by the city, and it's really in every bus stop in the street, and it says, in Antwerp we speak diamond. But it's horrible, because we have like, I think 1 out of 5 people is born in poverty in Antwerp. And so, okay, the point of them is that Jewish and Indian and communities have always been working together, and so it's just, that's a very top-down and really not based on our real DNA, a kind of marketing or identity creation. Just wanted to share.
Yeah, I think the point is that your group obviously has the skills to express your identity very well, and you also have the visual skills, and you can make it indeed very sexy and good to consume. But a lot of groups don't have these skills. They can't make the poster that there's something different than diamonds. So I think there's a lot of work. And maybe that's also what we as designers can contribute, a lot of work to allow people to express themselves and their ways of their projects, their initiatives and so on, and make them sexy enough for a policy maker to notice them and to make it into something more interesting or for them as well. So I think there's a big challenge, and so it's not only in doing the design, but also thinking about how we can nurture people to do it for themselves. Yeah.
I think something that as designers can really contribute to helping other groups of people in the city get their point across is we can help them avoid negativity. It's a really important point, because as a designer you try to sell positive points, but my experience is that by statistics, being negative about something, you have a 10 times bigger chance of being right in the end. Like when you think about it, like you guys too, you have to start 10 projects and one will survive in the end. It's normal. For me it's normal. Like when I have to talk to 10 customers and one will give me a job. It's a 1 to 10 ratio. So you're 9 times, when you're negative, you're 9 times right more often. And So being negative is a good strategy, but on the other hand, it sucks. So what would be really helpful, and that's what we do in Aachen when we work with interest groups, neighborhoods, whatever, to make their ideas positive. Because just saying this is not working, that is not working, it's not constructive. That's the thing. So I think that's really where I see my job, to motivate people to think positive and formulate their projects in a positive way, in a constructive way.
I was wondering how this question, that is more a social question, how it can fall into the spatial, maybe those with a background in architecture, thinking of, I don't know, you don't have to answer, because indeed as an educational tool, I'm wondering if, for instance, in this school in Ruhr, is there an architectural brief or attempt to designing the city in a more traditional sense? And maybe, of course, Liesbeth, you might have another take on this.
I think the social always has spatial manifestation, and it's very important, the type of spaces that we design. That's why, I don't know, yesterday when I arrived to the school and I saw that fantastic chaos at the end of the restaurant, I thought this is super interesting, because it's talking about the kind of spaces that you're envisioning, like this kind of, or the kind of school that you're envisioning, this kind of in the making, and you could really, I could really appreciate that. I don't know, to be specific, for us in the school, we had this first moment of being nomads and kind of parasiting the spaces, the cities where we went, by turning ourselves into hosts sometimes. So in every trip we did we hosted a dinner where we invited 3 local practitioners or politicians or artists to present their work. So it was this inversion of, okay, we're doing a site visit, but now we're hosting, and we are doing it also in a space with a spatial proposition, let's say, of how we arrange the tables or how we cook together. And then when we situated the school in the Ruhrgebiet, we decided to go to a kind of a problematic area in the city where all the other empty shops, and there is like kind of economic stagnation, and rent storefront, and make the school there. And basically by doing that, we were contributing a little bit to this conversation from the city marketing. It was like, oh, we have this area, we don't know what's happening, and they come with absolutely no idea. And then the shop owners don't want to rent it out. So we try to kind of disrupt that situation by saying, look, there are possibilities, there are other ways of occupying the space. Let us do it. And now with our cultural funding is over. It lasted for almost 10 months. But the shop is now occupied by students from the university, so it continues. Yeah.
So it is about identifying spaces, existing spaces, and the potential you can find in them and explode that to bring a community or the people, to connect with the people and create maybe that identity, that local identity that can bring from a space, a place.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us as a school, we were not very much concerned about creating an identity. We were very aware that the Ruhrgebiet in this city has a very different cultural background. You have like Turkish, Syrian, Russian, Latin Americans. When you start to investigate a little bit what is the social composition of Britain, you come like it's quite surprising. It's not like you think it was just the Germans. Yeah, it's very mixed. For us as a school, there was no mission on creating an identity. It was more like having open doors policy, being for free, trying to connect with them through activities that was trying to speak to them, let's say. Yeah. But coming back to this idea of the social needs as spatial manifestation, and this can be, you don't need so much resources to do that. It can be maybe the refurbishment of just open the doors of an empty shop.
I can pose a question maybe relating to this, to your idea or what you did, like occupying or renting empty spaces. You know, most cities have these problems, and Aachen, for example, has this situation of never really having had a crisis, a substantial crisis, as compared to maybe Haarlem, which is a neighbor city in the Netherlands, which is one of the first shrinking cities in the Netherlands. You know, the Netherlands is one of the most highly densely populated countries in Europe, and it has a shrinking city. You know, what do you do? You know, they used to have one hospital extra. You know, they had two, and they had to close one down, and they had to close down 2 police stations and sell the police cars. But who wants a used police car? You know, stuff like that. Really hands-on problems. But well, how would you? I'm thinking about this black swan theory that, you know, things only start moving when shit hits the fan. Not before that. Like trying to get empty spaces. You know, we tried that in Aachen. It's impossible. The rents are so high. The tax system is so strange that saves you money to leave a space empty, stuff like that. So in Aachen, it's almost impossible to do something like that. How would you posing this question? Do you need a black swan for something to happen?
In Brussels, actually, what I seen was that if there was a defined project from social entrepreneurs who collectively went to approach a landlord with a project to say, okay, this is what we want to do in this space, and you know, it's lying empty anyway, could you give us it for free for 6 months or reduced rent? And surprisingly, we've seen a lot of this happening, and a lot of the sort of co-working spaces, and especially with the mix of social entrepreneurs who are coming up and saying, okay, we've got a project on zero waste, we've got a project on mobile fab labs, we've got a project on mental health, we want to use this space. And actually, I think when they were approached with specific projects that were to be developed, they seemed to be more open. If there was a kind of, even if there was a win-win at some point, if they had a problem that needed solving, they would say, okay, will we come in, we'll do some consultancy for you, and if we can use your space. So we've seen a lot of this happening in a lot of areas, actually even from Molenbeek to near the airport in Eber, where there was sort of redundant buildings. And then we've seen a lot of these companies popping up with exactly what you were explaining, the kind of middlemen that were wanting to, you know, link social entrepreneurs to investors and landlords, and even the city eventually, where they would come to some agreement for using that building for X amount of time.
question, because maybe the problem of Aachen and Ruhrgebiet are very different to European capitals, like where the amount of space is, let's say, properties, like a hot thing that you want to. Or at least, well, I come from Berlin, and we saw that what you just said, this interim use or these waiting lands, having a very bad result, because this, especially in Berlin, the amount of property was, I mean, there was a lot of property vacant in the 2000s, and a lot of people come with creative ideas that did interim uses, and then at the end we know the result. It's like they just raise the value of the land, get thrown away, and the real investment comes. So I was wondering if with your initiative because you protect, or you kind of envision a future that goes beyond these temporary uses for the startups.
Yeah. There has been instances where it's been long term, but then there's still been an agreement where it's a reduced rate for rent. It's knowing that it's still social entrepreneurship, because I think there is still a benefit for some of these landlords here, if I'm not mistaken, rather than it lying empty, that if they're giving it to a good use, of course it's also in their benefit. So they've been willing to do that also. But of course the gentrification aspect of sort of rising rates, I think that's a big issue. I mean, certainly in the area of Dunsar, which is a sort of fashion district in Brussels, I know there's been a lot of fight against the gentrification and having some of the big brands there. But I think also there has to be an acknowledgement to areas and high streets like Dunsar, for example. I can just say, there's a big difference also with technology, because I think we've not spoken about the sort of effects of technology and what that has in cities and communities and areas, and how we need to also, I think about, because there's still even a big difference between a shop, for example, that is, they've got young, 20-somethings that are on Instagram that are like, using the social media, compared to an area or some of the shops where they're not even on the internet and not on the web. And so I think no matter how creative that business or little boutique shop is, that if they're not aware of the digital aspect of how they can move their business forward, move the area forward, then there's still this big divide. I'm just wondering if that's something that the digital aspect, if it's something that, as creatives, we try and avoid to think about or talk about, or if it's something that, I don't know, you come across, because we're certainly having to deal with both sides, creative and digital, to see how they work together.
It's a debate for another hours of, I think. I'm checking in for if we can go. So you have a question after?
I think
I have the keys, like a lot.
I think, digital approaches, they should only make sense as tools for real life. If you do something digital, in the end it should be people meeting people and feet on the ground. That's, I don't believe in dating on the internet. I like meeting people in person, so that's what it comes down to. I think that's digital means should be a helpful tool to get people to meet each other in person. If you need to program a platform for people to pick up a barbecue set that the city provides to meet their neighbors that live in the same house, then that's cool. But in the end, it should be, how do you get these neighbors to meet and have a barbecue? So if a digital solution helps, then it's fine. It should be easy to use, and that's digitalization for me in that aspect. Or is it? Yeah, it should be also provocation. So say something different.
Not really different, but I think it is also an invitation for the public to step in since you are here and not on a digital platform. So, with other questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions actually. So now I will just speak loud if it's okay for everyone.
Okay. And you tell me to whom you
I think I will just put on the table a few questions for everyone because I heard a very interesting project and I would like to arise some question also for the schools. So we are talking about the city itself as a kind of container of challenge and opportunity, but do you think it's necessary to open up a dissertation on what is the common aspect of the city? What is the common gods of the city? Like try to be a little bit more specific in which are the dynamics within the city that we can address. And the second question is that I would like to know from your personal and professional experience how you actually engage individuals, because of course there's a way to engage organization, association, and people that are already active within their own activity. But I would like to hear the concrete example of how you engage the individual. For instance, you share about this bureau project, which is a way. I don't know, you go for interviewing, you go for mapping. I don't know which are your concrete strategy to engage people and individual, and as well how you collect ideas and wishes. Like, is that the point where design can help figure out how the strategy to engage the individual, the people, and yeah, and the other question, and I'm finishing here, I have a few more, but what is the difference for you between making or building a collective identity and branding an identity?
This allows me also to address the digital aspect, because the very concrete strategy we take in Genk, but also in Hasselt with the small project I was explaining earlier, is we have the principle to also always start first from the individual. So in the sense that if we have a certain neighborhood or the Koekelberg, for instance, it's a long track which crosses like 3 neighborhoods in Genk, so it's quite, and even beyond in the region, connects a lot of other cities. But we literally traveled around alongside the Koekelberg with a cargo bike, and with the cargo bike, when we encountered someone, we asked them to make a poster of their particular skill, like a skill they have, like, I don't know, gardening or whatever, and explain what they were doing there across this Koekelberg, and to imagine what this Koekelberg could mean for them in the future. So we did some future thinking in a sense already with the individuals. First, what do they do today? What could they do if this Koekelberg would be developed? And then we started posting these stories online. It already generated some discussions. We have the local level, but then you have, of course, a lot of issues that are that extend beyond the local. For instance, we had a story about a person who's a youngster, a Turkish youngster from Genk, and he said, okay, you can start a lot of initiatives here, but most people don't have the skills to bring it further to a project. So in a sense, your project is naive, and but then he said, yeah, what I would like to do is really start up like a project office where through building events, we build skills in making projects, for instance. So that was what he would like to do alongside that track. So we posted the story online, and then we saw immediately enormous reactions of people saying, oh yes, you really want to do that on that location, I know this person and this person.
When you talk online, you talk about Facebook or maybe
Facebook, and we are developing a project iteratively, a digital platform, and because Facebook is sufficient if it's on a very basic level, you can post your personal stories there, but when it comes to really connecting people on a local level, it's often not enough. And so we post it on the platform we're developing, and then on Facebook, and so we have different types of reactions. And then we started clustering in co-design workshops, very concrete workshops in our living lab space. For instance, all these people working on skill building, or all these people working on food as a team, or all these people working on energy as a team, and to start making new types of collectives. And in that sense, for instance, a cooperative on food started to grow. People who said, okay, we share this expertise, but I'm too small to do it alone. And so they started to exchange on that. And in that sense, small projects started to form, and then these projects were also posted online. So we could already speculate about projects that were not reality today, but could already start triggering some imagination about the future.
And you make also people content makers.
Yeah, indeed. And it's their story, and it's their collaborative story, and it's also a way of. So it's speculation in a way, but starting from very daily reality, things they really want to do together, that they can do together based on their shared skills. So the project, even though it will be probably, even if it's approved, the whole cold track thing, it will take 3 years to develop, but it's already in the collective imagination growing, and so the digital allows people to dream about this future, but also to discuss about this future, because maybe what is interesting for one is not interesting for another. So we also saw a lot of conflicts between interests on, for instance, there was this old church, and I think I met 15 people who had plans for that same church, and all these plans, of course, conflict. So, how do you decide what plan is the most interesting? So you put them together and they start discussing. So it should also allow for conflict. So the stories should not be, pretend that it will be all paradise.
It's a more fruitful way for change, for create change.
I think what's always important is to formulate a task, to make people feel that they can decide things. Like in Germany, we call it, we have a very high rate of government. Like when you pay taxes, you give up responsibility and stuff, so you let the state do things and decide, and they're always bad decisions. So that's very typically German. So, so it's a very good idea to give people the feeling that they can be active and not just be passive consumers, and to formulate tasks, pre-formulate.
How do you trigger those people to be active?
That's tricky. When you in some parts of a discussion, democracy doesn't work. Basic democracy, you have to pre-think. That's my experience. You have to pre-think a few options, formulate them in a positive way, and then formulate tasks, and then get people to work. Yeah. It's a lot of moderation, basically, to keep it constructive and positive. I mean, you can get anything going.
Sorry?
You can get a lot of things going that way. It's small, very small, but
I'm not sure if on the question of commons and maybe turning it towards an action as well as being discussed. I think as well maybe in the book you're preparing, like turning the commons into commoning. Maybe you can reply to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were referring to the commons or to a common idea.
Yeah, to the commons.
Yeah. What was the question?
If in this specific context of Hasselt where we're gonna work and where we just arrived, so we don't know so much from the cultural background, but in general, if you feel like from your experience it's necessary to open up a discussion about the commons in order to address the strategy into what is the commons towards the city.
Yeah, for me it's important to address the common because it's opening a possibility between the binary of the state and the private. In our book we commissioned a common expert. We also had a class, our program had also a commoning class where we learned about the history of the commons and the theory of the commons. And now in the book we asked Silke Hilfrich. She's a theory. She's a commons theorist, and she's explaining this idea of that the commons need to be understood by not only a pool of resources, which was like the initial idea, but as a triangle of these resources, the commons, which can be material or immaterial, and then you have the commoners, which is a group of people, that assemblies themselves, and then the practice of that, which is the verb, bringing this commoning idea. So without these 3 points, it's hard to kind of, let's say, enact the theory. So I can pass you on this essay. It's very interesting. Yeah.
You will send a copy of the book once it's.
Yes, I will send a copy once it's printed. Yeah.
Is there maybe one more question?
Yeah, I've got a small question. It's involved for a part also what she was asking. Somebody said something about like how are we going to adapt the space to make it, for example, mentally more healthy. Why do people sometimes get mental health problems inside the city, inside a certain environment? Do you all specifically go and search people with those experience to add to the involvement of your own project, and how does that come about? How do you find those people? How do you?
For me, it was very personal. I have a son. One of my sons has got special needs and mental health challenges, and I found nothing in the city that was inclusive for him beyond school. So I'm that user. I did this first as a mother and then as a designer. So, and also it was a lot of observations, being around community and being around friends, where say out of 20, there's one that's had a burnout, there's one that's depressed, there's one that's had a parent with dementia. So it was looking and then seeing and observing what is there in society, what do we have in our immediate community, and then it was obviously defining the problem, but also chatting to the children. For me, it was chatting to the school, chatting to the children, so putting them in the centre and seeing what are their needs, and their needs were, for example, what their wants were, to be somewhere where they felt included, where they felt they had an identity that was creative and digital. So then it was getting professionals and people around that, from the hospital to autism specialists to designers to visual designers actually, and then also digital people. So a lot has been observations, but also I think statistics speak for themselves. I was at a conference the other week at the EU where it was about the EU disability strategy from 2020 to 2030. And when I was sitting there and listening to statistics of 80% of people with disabilities have the skills and the means, but they're not employed because of discrimination. So there it's about inclusivity. And so a lot has actually been about observations through the network actually of social entrepreneurs in the ecosystem and designers, and also doing collective intelligence sessions with community, with people, with putting it on Facebook as an event, as a hackathon for refugees, for example, and then calling out to creatives and people in the community who come along and say, okay, how can we help people that are, feeling excluded, who have health issues or mental health problems, including the refugees actually, and saying how can we create solutions, what are the solutions if we bring people together. So yeah, there I think so much has to do with actually not just creating something for the sake of creating it, because then we become like a top-down system. You have to be really bottom-up and actually talk to people who have these issues. And so there it was a lot of research and asking people who have issues, whether it's burnouts and depression, and what is it in their immediate environment that makes them feel this way. So I think so much is to do with research and also speaking to the academics in the schools and the people themselves actually, because it's the citizens who should be really designing their own cities and communities. And I think you have to really engage with the people.
We have still 5 minutes. One last remark or question by the public, preferably to give you the floor, of course, by the panel guests.
Maybe I have a question. What do you think about our role, or our position towards the city? The city is too general, but towards the people, the role of dominance of design, or the humbleness of design, the constantly shifting. How do we play this collaboration with continuously changing groups or people? What is our role as a designer, and what is our position, or what is our emotionality towards people? Possibly Maarten.
And I would add to that maybe also a role that might be not only with direct impact, but as well a role that has a transgenerational impact. I mean, it goes really in a time span that goes beyond now me, now this government, etc.
About the role, I think we have a society that is not in itself very educational. I think there is a very big difference between what parents teach their children and how parents behave themselves. I think we learn our children to not compete and think about collective and common, but at the same time you're competing and fighting for not the collective well-being but for our own happiness, and so there is this need for I think education, and education, and it's been mentioned before, is very important. It's, by the way, the most important parameter in the Gross National Happiness Index. It defines, it's the biggest contributor to people's happiness or not, but it's also a way to transfer values, I think. And so what my answer should be, or could be to your question, is what the role of a designer is. I think what the process of designing is in a way transferring and interacting about values. And so what I believe is that we have never needed more values and exchange of values in these times, challenging times, and that design has the ability to facilitate a dialogue on these values. And I'm just speaking from my own practice, where every time you talk about the design of a neighborhood or the master plan or the future, it's the perfect opportunity to have a dialogue on what really matters for whoever is involved. So my answer would be design is a beautiful opportunity to interchange values.
It's really a great way to end. And we can continue, I guess, on the way out of this beautiful building, on this idea of values. I think it fools a lot of debate beyond this today. And thank you again.
Thank you.